Doyle Redland reporting. The Holzapfel family, long feared missing or spiritually dead, was found alive in the Chicago suburb of Buffalo Grove today, somehow managing to survive in the hostile environment for more than 8 years. Rescuers discovered the five-person clan after a survey plane spotted a signal fire from a barbecue grill. To protect themselves from the elements during their long ordeal, the Holzapfels fashioned a 3-bedroom ranch-style lean-to with brick facing and white aluminum siding. Paramedic Mary Gills was first on the scene.
They were all suffering from severe cultural malnutrition.
The Holzapfels have been returned to civilization for now, though trips to the Art Institute of Chicago and a nice Peruvian restaurant intended to reacquaint them with urban living have been met with confusion and resistance. Doyle Redland for the Onion Radio News, online at theonion.com.
Got Telegram? You can follow our channel there and discuss show prep with other listeners at telegram.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
And we're back. And the captain is back. Back to the snack bar.
Admiral Snack Bar? Captain Who's the What's now?
He's back.
Yeah, I was actually back last night. For those of you playing along with the home game of Free Talk Live, the captain had fallen ill and missed the
Star date.
both the New Year's shows and the greatest star date that could have ever possibly been, at least while I'm alive. But
Well, I mean, another 100 years you could make it.
But, you know, Mr. Classic, you were here in my stead,
Yes.
and you sort of, you know, did the thing for me.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We should go back to the tape and listen to it, but we don't have the tape.
It's online over
It's
at
online somewhere.
find the archives over at freetalklive.com. So yeah, I was back yesterday. It went well. Although I did make mention of I'm thankful for Bonnie filling in for me, of course.
Right.
Although she said something like, "Yeah, the captain's out sick, so I'm taking over." Instead of filling in.
I think
so.
she had a rumor that you were dead.
So yeah. So it's Bonnie's world now. We're all just living in it.
It's like Paul McCartney. He's dead.
But yeah, my apologies to those who expected me to be here. I could not. I'm pretty sure I had the COVIDs.
The cerveza sickness.
Yeah,
Really?
I say that because like it was more mild than the first time I had it way back in whenever that thing kicked off.
Yeah.
And by mild, I mean like the symptoms were in a regular order this time. The first time I had the COVID, the symptoms were just wacky. Like I got the cough first.
Right.
Then I started sweating. And then I started sneezing. And then, it was just
Did
out
you
of
feel
order.
apathetic? That was the biggest, when I had cerveza, it wasn't very bad, but there was just something that just made me lethargic and just apathetic. Like if I was sitting on the couch and I was thirsty and there was a glass of water right in front of me, I'd be like, I don't know. That's too much work.
Man, that's a lot of effort.
That's a lot of work to get to that.
Reach over and grab that glass of water.
So that was like the biggest symptom for me is like, I just don't feel like doing anything.
I guess there might have been some of that. When I had it the first time, we'll call it Cerveza 1.0, I distinctly remember a period of, I don't want to say hallucination, but like where like reality and my daydreaming and my sleep dreaming all sort of meshed together.
Good times.
I was telling Richie Rich this and Peakless last night on the show that like I thought something had happened and I was going to text my friend about it. And
But
then
you texted yourself?
It turns out I woke up enough to be like, wait a minute, that didn't actually happen. I just sort of imagined that happening, and I was going to text somebody about it, and then I was like, oh no, wait, that didn't actually happen.
Yeah.
So this weird like lucid dream sort of thing that happened to me again this time, but only for like a couple of days. It wasn't like a 4-day stretch or anything like that. There was just a couple of days where I felt like really like, and I slept for like 3 days. I just got up to like drink water and hit the John or whatever.
That's good.
But I've been symptom free for I don't know 4 or 5 days now.
So we're all safe.
Yeah,
Safe.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah.
But you're feeling better now, though. I missed all that, of course.
Yes.
But.
Yes. Welcome, Nikki.
Stuck
Thank
behind
you.
a plow.
Yes.
We should.
What are we talking about here?
We should. Start the show. I guess.
Yeah.
Captain's log. Star date. What is it? 01072024. 24.
24.
That's right, everybody. Get used to writing 24 now.
24
instead of 23.
I just got used to writing 2-3.
I know.
So
It's how it goes. You get used to a thing, and then they change it on you. The bastards.
What did you call it? The happy calendar switch date? Instead of happy New Year?
Oh,
What's
happy
your-
calendar reset day or something.
calendar
Yeah.
reset day. Right?
Yeah. Let's see. We did Captain's Log. We did the Star Day. We did, in the studio tonight, it's the authentic Lord Reverend Dr. Captain Kickass Buckshot Esquire, if you will, LLC. Joining me.
Steve Classic.
and Nikki.
And we're
She's
gonna
back.
do
You're
a Sunday show. Yes, we're all back.
And I'm gonna be on vacation.
Well,
for a month.
Okay.
Well, not
It'll be
vacation.
fine.
I'm traveling for sports.
We have a surprise for all of the Sunday listeners.
Ooh.
We're going to bring Richie Rich back
Oh.
in your absence.
Wow.
So he's going to fill in for you on the Sunday so we get the...
Yeah, the schedule is like just getting mixed up.
Yeah, sometimes we got to switch some hosts around.
Yeah, a little
and,
jumbly,
that kind of
it's
a
all
thing.
in good
And,
fun.
None of us... This is not... Listeners out there, if you're familiar at all with Free Talk Live, you already know. But those of you who don't, this is not a job for any of us. This is not like we get like a stipend that's supposed to be like gas money.
It's basically free.
Maybe buy your
It's
buy
volunteer
your
work.
dinner.
It's volunteer work.
This is what's the word I'm thinking of? Activism.
Yeah.
Right. This is activism. And so we all have other, ways and means and jobs and things of that nature. So we don't get paid for doing this. This isn't a job for us. We come here and we do this because, we believe in the message of freedom. And hopefully you do too. So we have some stories to get to today. We're lucky enough to have 3 number 2 stories.
I know, I saw that.
Hat trick.
Which, I call it the trifecta. Yeah. But we'll see. We'll probably get to maybe 1 or 2 of them. I don't know. We'll see what we have. We've got a bunch of other stories too. And I know you mentioned somebody might be calling in.
Yeah.
I'm curious if they call in. I mean, I have a bunch of questions, but I'm curious to see what happens there. But first, before we get into anything else, if you're a sports type person, I know libertarians are loath to sports ball, hand egg, blah blah blah, this kind of thing. But there's an important thing happening, and that is
Super Bowl? Wait, I can't say Super Bowl. I'm sorry.
From Reason.com. America has borrowed $1 trillion since the start of the NFL football season.
And when would that have been?
Oh, okay.
September.
So that's not preseason.
$1 trillion. Borrowed.
Trillion with a T.
So this is them borrowing it, not stealing it.
Well, so they're borrowing it from the Federal Reserve.
First they have to borrow it, and then they have to steal it.
And then guess who gets to pay it back?
No one.
Well,
because we're in several $1 trillion of debt.
Right.
So.
But the taxes
What's
they collect.
another trillion?
The taxes they collect go to pay that and the interest, mostly the interest. But this article is all about the federal government is borrowing money at a mind-spinning rate, and you can't blame it on the COVID-19 pandemic anymore, says the headline. Here's how fast the federal government is borrowing piles of money. When the national debt hit $33 trillion mid-September, the current National Football League season was already 2 weeks old. You don't have to be a fan of sports to know that football season in America isn't particularly long, excluding the playoffs. Teams play 17 games over the span of 18 weeks. The final games of the season are scheduled to be played this upcoming weekend, a few days after the national debt officially surpassed a new threshold, $34 trillion.
$trillion.
According to an announcement made Wednesday morning by the Treasury Department. In other words, don't feel bad about how much money you've probably lost on sports betting and fantasy leagues this year. The federal government has run up a $1 trillion tab in less time, and the next $1 trillion threshold isn't far off.
Geez, you think they put the $1 trillion on the Dallas Cowboys trying to make some money?
Yeah.
Hopefully they make some back.
Sports bet it away. Hey, FanDuel, we got $1 trillion bet.
Yeah.
The Patriots will make the playoffs.
There's more to say about this, but I suspect this might be unscreened caller. You're on Free Talk Live. What's your name, please?
This is Daniel Banya from Slate Ridge.
Yes, so this is our guy.
Hey, Daniel. Welcome to the show.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm curious. Nikki kind of, gave us a brief summary of what you might be calling about. I'm curious what state are you in?
I'm in the state of Vermont.
So it is Vermont. Okay. I think I may have read something about you and your situation, but since it's your first time calling in, why don't you go ahead and give our listeners the version. What's going on?
Sure. So once again, my name's Daniel Banya. I'm down here in West Paulet, Vermont. West Paulet, Vermont is a small town, about 690 full-time residents in Rutland County. A lot of people ask the landmarks as to geographically where I am. I'm pretty much in between Manchester, Vermont, and Rutland, Vermont, if those are some landmarks that may be a better focal point for people.
Okay.
But, I've made some national news here, and really the elevator pitch, the synopsis is, with these unbelievable conclusions is that I have this land in the middle of nowhere. Just recently some ethical news medias did a Google Earth to really show the perspective of my plot. I have over 30 acres and there's thousands of acres around me.
Mm-hmm.
But needless to say, behind me is the largest slate quarry in the world.
Okay.
They mine a very specific color of slate out of there. So in perspective to what I'm doing or what impacts I have on civilization, it's really critical to overemphasize that I'm in the middle of nowhere. To complement that, I'm also at the highest elevation, the
Okay.
highest habitable elevation in my community. So having some of those, focal points and base points already listed, I get this permit. I come up with this idea to build a training facility here. Under the state, I'm registered as an educational facility. Under the town, I'm permitted under a school/training facility. So I build this modern, sophisticated, environmentally friendly shooting range.
Mm-hmm.
And this is after you already went through all of the state paperwork that they would require, right? Like you did the things that they asked for.
Yes. Correct. Plus a lot more, Nikki. What a lot of people never were privy to is the federal permitting, which was a federal firearms license, a federal destructive device, a federal explosive license. So there was other licensing criteria and qualifications that superseded the state as far as the authenticity of what I was doing. So, and a lot of people look at that doctrine, right? Are you local, state, or federally certified? For my particular situation, which I think exacerbated my problem, is that I was so endorsed by the federal government with the appropriate certifications and bonding that, that aggravated the community and ultimately put me in the position I'm in, along with a lot of other scenarios. But, I build this facility. It's completely free. It's a little biased. I'm saying it myself. It's world renowned. You can bring your family, your mother, your daughter, your sister, your children, to come here to shoot. There is no prerequisites other than being an American citizen, obviously, because we can't put firearms in hands of non-American or prohibited people. So I make this establishment, right? I make this beautiful place for anyone to come, and that anyone really what set the monotone of my problems, because Paulet, Vermont, whether you know it or believe it, is some of the most racist people on this planet. And I like to say that with confidence because, the diversification and ability for me, collaborating and working with people all over the world, I have a good picture on that, right? So I let these folks come here, people of color, the LGBTQ plus, people of the Jewish community, and the list goes on. Asians, Hispanics, blah, 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 blah. That's really when the town started this issue, right? This problem metastasized with my lack of saying, hey, listen, here's a criteria, right? Here's a prerequisite. Here's a condition. And, for me personally, I grew up in New York. Everybody in my neighborhood was a little bit of everything.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a buffet of people.
Yeah, the melting pot, right?
All a little, right. So I kind of incorporated that ideology coming to Vermont, saying, well, okay, I'm sure I'm going to meet some good old boys, or I'll meet some of this, or I'll meet some of that. Man, oh man, let me tell you something. This community has been polluted with some of the most evilest people I've ever met in my life, and look what they've done to me. I've made national news losing two very important constitutional rights. My Second Amendment rights, the only property in the state of Vermont, in the history of Vermont, having a Supreme Court ban of any firearms to be discharged on my property.
Wow.
So they did that to your facility after you went through all of the necessary state and federal paperwork, jumped through all of their hoops.
That is correct.
And you're suspecting this is because the locals didn't like that you were bringing in, some diversity into the area, people of color going to your shooting range. You're suspecting the locals didn't like that, and they targeted you for this reason.
Correct. You can see me on December 16th, 2019, where I call out one of our select board members, right? Fox News was in the audience there that day. And Edgar Cleveland, he goes by Ed Cleveland, he said on record, yes, I go to Ku Klux Klan meetings against you and your kind.
Jeez.
So
wow.
He said that on the record?
Wow.
That's
right?
bold
You
these
can
days.
just Google it. So the issue for me was, guys and ladies, is that, I had this establishment. It was already permitted. I had already said to people, through the grapevine, there was no commerce, so there wasn't like advertising. It was just, people could read my Facebook page and say, hey, listen, can we come? I'm going to bring my mother. I'm going to bring my sister. I'm going to ride in with my horses. Do you have water? Blah, 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 blah. And we build this beautiful facility and present this embracing environment for people, to come of all ages, all creeds, all colors, all sexual preferences, and then bam, the pressure came on. And the pressure came on originally by, they call it the Warren Switch Klan. They're a Ku Klux Klan chapter. They're an offshoot of these radical, hatred people, believe it or not. But they're also anti-gun. If you think a little bit more further into their ideologies, when you think about someone coming to lynch you or beat you up or something, you'd think they'd bring a gun, but these folks bring like a pitchfork and a potato hoe. But they mustered the energy. They facilitated the collaboration with local and state officials to really embrace this anti-gun movement. And they've been extremely successful. My property was demolished in June, the first week of June.
Wow.
With the court order. I had to remove all my buildings.
Yep.
All of the shooting stuff. There was the threat of arrest. There was an arrest warrant out for me then, as there is now. And now there's another arrest warrant out, and now they're attacking my agriculture. I have over 250 animals here that necessitate a complex farming agricultural protocol,
Sure.
feeding them, housing them, et cetera, et cetera. And now the town has attacked that in their latest motions to remove my grain silo, my chicken coop, my goat milking parlor, and other infrastructures that are heavily predicated on this agricultural farming model.
So what's your timeline to move to New Hampshire? Do you have a timeline for that?
People send me emails. I get very people that say they'll bankroll the move, the infrastructure rebuilding. I recently said this on a podcast out west right before Christmas. When I came to buy this property, right, I looked at it and I said, after looking at many, many different pieces of property throughout the tri-state area, the focal points were either A, lackadaisical gun laws. Okay, I'm just being completely transparent.
Yeah.
Or states that really embrace, a Second Amendment respect. They respected the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
So, when I found this property, I looked at the topography, I looked at the elevation changes, I looked at all the dynamics of how I could literally produce a place that I could say, hey, listen, EPA, anyone from the state, all of the embracing law enforcement communities that used to come and shoot and train here, I could say, listen, unequivocally, if you discharge a firearm on my land, unequivocally, your projectile will be embraced somewhere within my 30 acres.
Right, yeah.
And that's a very difficult thing to say for any other firearms venue anywhere in the United States.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I produced this place. I feel that, I really did walk on eggshells in the beginning. There's a couple of families, the most notable that's in the news frequently, the Hewlett family, the largest affluent and, economically viable family member, Mr. Richard Hewlett in the community here. They embrace a conquer and control ideology for over, several hundreds of years of, controlling the community, controlling who is in the community, controlling the commerce in the community. And, I unfortunately came up against these folks, and they've been successful since 1837. The community has really boasted with propaganda of this pro-white, pure white community.
Wow.
And, listen, no, I don't think I'm going to co-align with you folks. And that has really put me in the particular situation I'm in now.
This sounds horrifying, and I can't even imagine like the price tag that you've had to foot to battle all of this thing. Like we talk on Free Talk Live all the time about the evils of the state and how like they don't even have to like win, right? They can just outspend you.
They just tie you up in court.
Yeah, tie you up in court until you're out of money, and then what are you going to do?
So what has really exacerbated my particular problem is what my attorneys and I frequently speak about on the record, and to different credible organizations like yourself or other pro-gun communities or pro-constitutionalists, is that on the record, it's really imperative that people focus on something that I'm about to tell you, and it's what we call the triangulation. So in my particular situation, if I can get your undivided attention, because this really should resonate as to how I'm failing. The town attorney, Miss Merrill Bent, she is representing the town. She's a heavy anti-gun person.
Hey, Daniel, I know you want us to pay attention. We're coming up. We got to do a thing. Can you hang on?
Yes.
All right, we're going to keep you over. I'm just going to put you on hold. Stay right where you are. This is Free Talk Live. Coming up, we've got more with Daniel and Slate Ridge and what's going on with him and the state. It's Free Talk Live, the Sunday night edition, 603-283-6160.
There is no such thing as attention span, according to Jerry Seinfeld, who figures that people have an infinite attention span if you are entertaining them. Hey, he's kept us from channel surfing for several decades, and now he's making more millions as a Las Vegas headliner. With money and attention so scarce now, effective communication skills have never been more important, especially if you're looking for work. So choose every single word as though it was the last word the person you're speaking to will hear. Otherwise, it might be. Avoid redundancies such as added bonus, advance warning, end result, prior history, or personal belongings. And avoid cliches like the plague. Just kidding. For more tips, hit survivalspeech.com. I'm Holland Cook.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Jagruti Dave.
An investigation is ongoing into the cause of a blowout on an Alaska Airlines Boeing 737 MAX 9 flight from Portland, Oregon to Ontario, California. A panel of the plane broke open in the middle of the journey and its pilots scrambled to make an emergency landing. Investigators are searching around the Portland area for the door plug that blew off Friday's Alaska Airlines flight. U.S. aviation officials have also ordered the grounding of around 171 Boeing 737 MAX 9s. Each plane will take around 4 to 8 hours to be assessed, and Alaska Airlines told customers to expect flight disruptions over the next week. None of the 171 passengers and 6 crew members were seriously hurt. A Boeing spokesperson said, "We agree with and fully support the FAA's decision to require immediate inspections of 737-9 airplanes with the same configuration as the affected airplane." The Israeli Defense Force says it has dismantled Hamas's infrastructure in northern Gaza. That's as the death toll from the Israel-Hamas war continues to rise, with Gaza officials blaming an Israeli airstrike for the deaths of 2 Palestinian journalists, and as Israeli officials say a police officer was killed in violence in the occupied West Bank. Trent Murray has more from Tel Aviv.
The IDF is saying it's continuing to push southward as part of its military operations. We've seen more airstrikes overnight around Khan Yunis and Rafah, as well as artillery fire, and it comes as the IDF spokesperson announced here overnight that they have now, in his words, completely dismantled Hamas's military framework within the northern part of the Gaza Strip, and that they are now winding back combat operations there. They say as part of those operations, they have now killed 8,000 militants from Hamas. That is according to the IDF.
The US Supreme Court is set to hear arguments next month over whether Donald Trump should be allowed on the ballot in the state of Colorado. The outcome will have a major impact on the upcoming presidential election. Ira Spitzer has more.
The U.S.'s top court will take up the appeal from former President Donald Trump contesting the ruling removing him from Colorado's upcoming primary ballot over his role in the January 6, 2021 Capitol riot. Colorado's Supreme Court cited the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, barring those who have engaged in insurrection from holding office. The justices will hear oral arguments on February 8th, and the former president, who is currently the Republican frontrunner, has argued that the Colorado court doesn't have the jurisdiction to decide eligibility for the presidency. The Supreme Court ruling is expected to set a national precedent for whether other states can follow Colorado's lead.
Our Matrix server is about as free as internet chat can be. Join the existing rooms or create your own at chat.freetalklive.com.
And we're back. Yes, it is Free Talk Live. Thank you for tuning in and listening to tonight's program. The telephone number, if you would like to comment, is 603-283-6160. We've been talking with Daniel Benai. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. He owns a 30-acre parcel of land in Vermont and has, put up some stuff, some shooting ranges, that type of thing. I've been inviting people to come and, learn about
play golf,
firearms, and,
yeah.
And he's got a bit of a homestead going on as well. So he's got some animals out there, farming, agriculture.
I mean,
type
it
stuff
sounds
going
great.
on.
And actually sounds a lot like someplace I know in New Hampshire.
Right.
And
so we're going to continue talking to him. But in the studio tonight, it's myself, the captain.
Steve Classic.
And Nikki.
Let's go ahead and bring Daniel back online now. I hope I didn't butcher your last name, Daniel.
No, it's okay. It's pronounced Bonnier.
Bonnier. Okay, great. Thank you so much. So you were about to reveal to us, and you even went to the extent of saying, I need everybody to pay close attention. And then we had to go to commercial. So go ahead and start over.
No worries. So this is the Trojan horse. Like, this is the triangulation that what has really embraced the totality and the sincerity of this is that while people are doing more research, as the years have been going on, they're beginning to see how I've been in such a failing position in the state. So the town attorney, Mrs. Merrill Bent, she represents the town and their efforts in destroying me, removing me from the property, foreclosing on the land, removing me from the state, et cetera, et cetera.
Wow.
Now, her law partner, Rob Wellington, he is the executive at Vermont Digger.
Wait, he's the executive for what? We lost you there for a sec.
He's the executive of Vermont Digger, their corporation.
Okay.
And what is Vermont Digger?
Vermont Digger is the largest, I'm not giving them compliments or kudos, but they're the largest publication in the state of Vermont.
Oh.
Okay.
And they have been hell-bent on destroying me with their publication. So let's just take a step back and look at this, right? So Merrill Bent, Mrs. Bent, she takes, client-protected information, gives it to Rob. Rob disseminates it through the Vermont Digger publications,
okay,
whether it be in print, whether it be online, whether it be audio, video, et cetera, okay? And then her child's father, Jared Bianchi, is the Assistant Attorney General in the state of Vermont.
Okay.
So if that doesn't put the hairs up on the back of your neck, they've controlled the media and they've controlled the constitutional amendments that I would be privy to. That's the triangulation.
Okay. There's something odd going on with your phone. Like when you start a sentence, every first word is a little quiet. I'm wondering if you're on like a Bluetooth headset or something.
Yeah. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Okay.
So I was, during the break, I was telling Nikki that I saw some video of you at what I can only call like a town hall type of hearing where you like went in front of, the officials. They're in Vermont or wherever. And I remember going, wow, this guy's getting the shaft. Can you, shed any light on that?
Sure. So basically, my town board, I exposed several years ago, favoritism, nepotism, and corruption. They didn't know what the word nepotism meant, so I took the time to really educate them.
Okay.
What I have felt, and many of their own constituents that didn't know, is that when you have a 5-panel select board, I mean, it's not select men because we have a female now, so it's select board members.
Sure.
But when you have at one end of the table an employer, business partner at the other end of the table, that's favoritism. When you have a father and a son, that's nepotism.
Right.
So when you look at votes or positions in which the town would go into an executive session or go into some means of yaying or naying my existence in the community, it's very corrupt because you have favoritism and nepotism.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the problem when we're kind of handing over power to these elected, quote unquote, officials, because this is usually how it is. Like, this isn't unique to Vermont. I'm sure this is happening almost everywhere in these situations. And people are, like Captain said, getting shafted and their freedoms are being taken away. And even in this case where Daniel did everything right, he jumped through all
signed
the
all
hoops,
the paperwork, paid all the fees, got the licensing.
And they still had the power because they're essentially, monopolizing and controlling everything in this area. They had the power to take away his rights and his freedoms.
But do you think that 4 out of those 5 board members should recuse themselves because of conflict of interest?
Sure. We've asked that in a number of different hearings, and their rebuttals are, first, they overemphasize that they're a quasi, they're a quasi branch, they're a quasi type of group of individuals.
Okay.
So they'll mutter that
board?
immediately.
The select board is quasi?
Well, that's what they'll say. That is on record that their go-to is that we're a quasi group. Then the second thing they'll say is that we're a small community. It's impossible to not have some bias, but we're professionals and we would not behave inappropriately. Yeah, and I've asked a number of times for many different levels of whether I'm in front of the select board or the developmental review board or the civil authority, the civil justice authority. Please, folks, your divided desire to eradicate me, to eliminate my constitutional rights, is heavily predicated and authenticated by corruption and favoritism and nepotism. That's actually my documentary. I'm filming a documentary now, and that's what it's really based upon. But they'll just say no and then continue, profound votes against me. I mean, listen, guys and gals, I've lost, across the board. I mean, I overemphasize to people how dangerous the precedent has been set in Vermont.
Yeah.
Heavy Republican people, even libertarians, many different groups have said, listen, we may not like this guy, right? We may not like that he likes guns or that he lets, every type of person come on his land. Okay. But he got a permit in 2016, and in 2021, they voided it and told them to take the buildings down.
Yeah, it just doesn't seem like that should be a lot. I'm just having a hard time even understanding how they can just revoke your permit and tell you have to...
And take your buildings down.
Yeah, like that's insane.
But, it's not difficult to understand. Like when you look at Judge Durkin's writings, this is another judge that is, I think we've tried to get him recused 2 times. He has said some really eccentric stuff about me.
He's quasi
on the record.
Mm-hmm.
He's labeled me as a boy. He said, "Listen here, son," and it's called
boy.
It's constituted a very tumultuous and toxic environment to litigate, some proceedings against me when you behave so biasly. But on in the 2021's decree, he said on page 17, paragraph 3, the last line, while Mr. Bonnier had a valid building permit, I voided it. That's a very, very pill to swallow.
Yeah, and also, why?
And how? I just don't get how that's even...
Once you have the permit, that should be it, right?
And I think that when we look at historically, whether you're in Vermont, Connecticut, Massachusetts, California, it doesn't really make a difference.
Yeah.
The whole process of speaking to your town officials, speaking to the authoritarians within your town, and within the scope of their abilities, their professionalism, right? I spoke to the zoning administrator. He came out. I told him my plans, filled out the paperwork, paid the fee, and he stamped me good to go. There's been a mockery about that, in the Vermont State Supreme Court when we went for remand and then we ultimately appealed it. 5 justices in Vermont said, well, Mr. Bonnier should have known that the zoning administrator did not have the authority to approve his permit.
What?
Why would you have known that?
Have known that? And also, who would have the authority other than them?
Yeah.
The town clerk?
And the comical relief of that is that I didn't say to the guy, let me see your ID. I went to his office. It said zoning administrator. I knocked. He let me come in. We filled out some paperwork. I escorted him to my land, and we did what was necessary.
Right.
What other authentication should I have done?
Yeah,
Is there a zoning board of appeals that you could have? I'm sure you've taken every legal avenue.
Yeah, unfortunately, in the state of Vermont, when that happens, then you go to this ridiculous branch, which has been really, made fun of across the country. This environmental court. There's only 2 judges for the entire state. But when you want to appeal or refute any of these types of proceedings or permit retractions, which I'm the first one, you would have to go through the environmental division of the Vermont State Supreme Court.
Good luck with that, huh?
Well,
so again, what is your timeline to move to New Hampshire? I'm saying that jokingly, but kind of seriously.
Yeah.
I don't know if it would be any better here. I don't know. Maybe.
I've been in New Hampshire. I have a lot of friends that end up retiring and going there. I looked at New Hampshire when I was in the infinite stages of building Slate Ridge.
Sure.
And I really think unequivocally, and even the professional gun tacticians or sportsmen or whomever, would come here. They'd be like, listen, Daniel, I go to an indoor range. I can only shoot in one direction. I can't shoot from my holster. There's a tremendous amount of liability if I make a mistake. And training is about making mistakes, guys.
Right.
So coming to an environment such as my personal property, which is protected under the Constitution, and saying, hey, listen, whomever you are, come here and embrace the land to utilize it to its fullest capacity, has now been taken away from me. There's an active warrant out for me now. Again, I think that's how Nikki found me.
Yeah.
Because I'm in court in the newest opposition here that they want to destroy my agriculture. And in order to destroy the agriculture, it's a double-edged sword, because if they take away all of the things that are required, statutorily, housing, food, water, etc., then I'll be committing another crime that I'm just not willing to do.
Right.
And why? So how did that all come up? Because this has been going on, you said, since 2016, and now fast forward to present day, now they're targeting. So you stopped your gun range that you had going on
there. Took down your
there.
structures, right, all that kind of thing.
And then now they're targeting your farm. What's up with that? How did that come about?
Yeah, I can tell you specifically. In 2022, Judge Durkin wrote a 100-page decision, but I'm going to spare you the boring things about it. But what he did was he looked at each structure, and I'm going to reference them, citing specifically my court documents. He looked at the chicken coop that I have, because we have over 150, maybe 200 birds here.
Okay.
He looked at the chicken coop and said in his legal decision, on Mr. Barnier's chicken coop, I see a lantern that has similar architectural value as the lanterns that were on the school/training building.
So?
Therefore, the chicken coop is directly related to shooting, and I must purge it from the property.
What?
Is that a joke? I mean, are you kidding?
That is ridiculous.
So basically, this is the same person, same judge that was attacking you before. So clearly they just have, that's ridiculous. So clearly they have something against you, and they're just making up a bunch of crap to try
have you ever seen those comical signs, funerals by Kubota, security by Winchester?
Yeah.
You ever seen those funny signs?
Yes.
Okay. My goat milking parlor, we had one of those signs on the front of there, right? It was a 6x9 sign.
They didn't find that funny, I bet.
This judge, he zoomed in on this picture and quoted a Stephen King paragraph out of one of his books that he reads, and says that because that sign was on the goat milking parlor, that the goat milking parlor was directly involved in shooting-related activities.
Wow.
Those evil goats.
Wow.
But the thing is, I could have, in any state, if I'm in Massachusetts, right, and I can't have guns there, if I had some sort of, a goat milking parlor, and I had any sort of, a picture of an AR-15 or
Free Talk Live bumper sticker.
Anything like that. You can have whatever wall hangings you want. You can have whatever decorative things you want.
Right.
That doesn't, just because I have a picture of an AR-15, and AR-15s are illegal, if you don't have a license in Massachusetts, that doesn't...
The
goats are accomplices.
Sense. Obviously he's getting railroaded. Daniel, you mentioned, I just want to circle back a little bit. You mentioned you're filming a documentary. Do you have a title for that yet?
You can't say it on the air.
Don't.
Okay.
Well, yeah, that's part of it, but we're very near to completing it. I like to tell people that it probably won't have a huge entertainment value, because all I'm doing is trying to win back my credibility from these rag news medias that have reported, really ridiculous and erroneous statements about me. But it's not surprising, because this is, a fundamental fact of what I believe. I always knew I was going to have a little bit of anti-gun pushback, right? It's not my first rodeo. I'm 55 years old. I've been all over the country, all over the world shooting guns.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's always a little tiff everywhere you go. I never thought in a million years this would metastasize into such a problem of such a group, of such a small group of people that hate the Second Amendment, and they'll do anything to get rid of guns. And that's really what is the precedent down here, right? Maybe we could have won on a different platform. We're in the Second Circuit, United States Federal Court, Second Circuit in Manhattan now,
okay.
Which we should be able to prevail. on a First Amendment violation. They made me take down the school. I could have repurposed the school into a church, Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, anything.
Right.
Granny's crocheting.
Vaccine clinic, they'd probably go with that.
Yeah, vaccine clinic. My LGBTQ groups that come here, they've had 100 different ideas for it. So there's a huge hit there. Yeah. And then the Second Amendment, obviously barring and prohibiting any type of discharging of firearms on 541 Briar Hill Road is lunacy. It's really ridiculous.
Is there a place that our listeners can go to, like a website or something, to find out more, to show their support, or to assist you in any way?
Sure. The only thing we have right now is we have a Give, Send, Go platform out there.
Sure.
We have other social media platforms. I can say this for you and your listeners: this recent warning. I think Nikki saw it, right? Wanted. They put these new wanted posters up about me.
Oh, jeez.
I think all the way from the governor down to the local police that are trying to get, their 5 minutes of fame or get on this popularity about my case, it's backfiring. Because if there is 1,000 comments, 998 are positive for me.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it was interesting because I recently quoted something. A month ago, Fox News did something, and it was 2.3 million views and 610,000 positive comments. Vermont is only like 700,000 residents. So, the size of Vermont really basically was supporting me in the sense of, hey, listen, this is fair, right? This is morally, legally, ethically aligned with what our freedoms stand for.
I found a link to a Give, Send, Go that says Stand with Slate Ridge. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
That's us. Yes, sir.
I will attempt to publish this to the Free Talk Live social media, so all of our listeners who are listening, as long as they subscribe to our social media, they can find a link to that. We're bumping up against the top of the hour here.
Yes.
So I want to just, make sure that people understand the depth of this, because we've only, barely scratched the surface of your situation. But I certainly encourage you to continue to call this show really whenever you want to. I mean, Nikki and I are here on Sundays, so if you want to call on Sundays, that's fine. It's always 7 to 10 p.m. The phones are always open. I want to encourage you to keep us and our listeners updated on this, because this sucks, man. I mean, it reminds me a little bit of, sort of what happened in Granby, Colorado. The way the town came together, like, just with a vengeance against one man. And
yes,
none of this should be happening to you, man. This is crap, in my opinion.
Thank you. I appreciate your guys' support. I appreciate you giving me the platform. Like, Nikki reached out, and I'm so grateful to her for this. I think she was able to see some of the tomfoolery with these folks that are muttering and regurgitating rhetoric that is completely, but that is something I learned too, that, I guess in closing this, people are like, Dan, you got to suck it up. It's, small community, good old boys. But another, caveat to that is this closed and small-minded people that just completely forget that, hey, listen, we may not like this guy, we may not like the story, we may not like guns, or he's letting all these folks come that we don't necessarily agree with, but it's a component of our constitutional rights that if they take a little bit away from me, they'll take a little bit away from you guys.
Absolutely.
Yep. That's how it starts.
Yeah. And I commend you for standing up for yourself and for your rights, because this isn't just about you and your situation.
No.
I mean, they could do this to anyone, and this is about defending everyone's rights. And you're fighting the good fight, and I commend you for that, because I can imagine that it is not easy. I mean, they've been targeting you for years. I mean, that's crazy. And what I saw on Facebook, I mean, I didn't really understand the whole situation. And even what you've just shed light on in this past hour or so has been really, it's so much worse than I could even thought.
While you've been telling us your situation, Daniel. I've just been kind of scrolling through articles that, I hit the search engine and it's amazing. Oh my gosh. Like I feel so bad for you, man. But also too, like, I respect what you're doing. Like Nikki said, standing up, like there's not enough people standing up in this day and age. And so I commend you and respect you for just standing up, because if you stand up, that means somebody else isn't going to be afraid to stand up at some point in their life. And I encourage that.
Thank you. It means a lot to me. My attorneys are always like, somehow you want to settle, and I'm like, no, I really don't, because what has happened to me
why should you?
Has happened to other people. I have some terrible stories that I could, the next time I call in, I could share with you. But this town has been notorious for literally ethically, religiously, socially cleansing people out of here. And let me be completely frank with you. If there was some type of forum or venue I could have saw this before I came here, I would have never moved here, right? When you buy property, you look at the taxes, you look at the school district, you look at the crime rate. If there was another category of how racist the people are in your community, and there was a denomination or a percentage, and it was high, I wouldn't have come here. But no, I'm not going to quit. I want your audience and yourselves to know that I'm going to keep fighting. It's kind of childish. I'm on the lam right now, like they're saying, hiding and avoiding arrest. But behind the scenes, we're working very, very diligently with some of the best legal scholars, the legal academia, and other scholastic people to really bring this complicated mess into a one paragraph, say all, to say, listen, here's what the Constitution says, and here's what the town took away from this guy that was constitutionally applicable.
Yeah, yeah.
I would run for first selectman. See what, give them a taste of their own medicine. I'm sorry, select board person.
Daniel Bonier, thank you so much for the call, man. We appreciate you. Feel free to call us again and keep us updated as things occur, because I am very keen to keep up on this story. Thank you so much. 603-283-6160 is the number if you would like to opine on this situation. If you have any perspective or familiarity with this, feel free to call. We've got more Free Talk Live on the way, including our number 2 stories.
Free Talk Live.
Rights are inherent because we're humans, and they're a good idea that we respect among one another. Look, I mean, I believe in the I believe in your right to defend yourself. So if you want to,
don't you believe in the right as a country to defend our borders?
Collectives don't have rights. Only individuals have rights.
No, we have right as a collective, as a country.
No, I don't think that you can grant something to a collective that you don't have yourself. So you don't have the right to, put a gun to my head and take money from me, right?
No, certainly not.
Okay, well then you wouldn't have the ability to grant that to a collective. You wouldn't have, you and 10 other people getting together wouldn't be able to create a collective right to put a gun to my head and take my money, would you?
Then what do we have government for?
I don't know, man. It's something we've been saddled with for a long time, and I think it's about time that we end it.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern at freetalklive.com.
My name is Jacob Hornberger. I'm president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, which Congressman Ron Paul awarded for having an outstanding freedom website. Write us at fff@fff.org, and we'll send you a free 3-month subscription to our monthly journal of libertarian essays and our booklet, Economic Liberty in the Constitution, which George Mason University economics professor Walter Williams praised in a recent column. That's fff@fff.org.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 2 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Jagruti Dave. An investigation is ongoing into the cause of a blowout on an Alaska Airlines Boeing 737 MAX 9 flight from Portland, Oregon to Ontario, California. A panel of the plane broke open in the middle of the journey and its pilots scrambled to make an emergency landing. Investigators are searching around the Portland area for the door plug that blew off Friday's Alaska Airlines flight. US aviation officials have also ordered the grounding of around 171 Boeing 737 MAX 9s. Each plane will take around 4 to 8 hours to be assessed, and Alaska Airlines told customers to expect flight disruptions over the next week. None of the 171 passengers and 6 crew members were seriously hurt. A Boeing spokesperson said, "We agree with and fully support the FAA's decision to require immediate inspections of 737-9 airplanes with the same configuration as the affected airplane." The Israeli Defense Force says it has dismantled Hamas's infrastructure in northern Gaza. That's as the death toll from the Israel-Hamas war continues to rise, with Gaza officials blaming an Israeli airstrike for the deaths of 2 Palestinian journalists, and as Israeli officials say a police officer was killed in violence in the occupied West Bank. Trent Murray has more from Tel Aviv.
The IDF is saying it's continuing to push southward as part of its military operations. We've seen more airstrikes overnight around Khan Yunis and Rafah, as well as artillery fire, and it comes as the IDF spokesperson announced here overnight that they have now, in his words, completely dismantled Hamas's military framework within the northern part of the Gaza Strip, and that they are now winding back combat operations there. They say as part of those operations, they have now killed 8,000 militants from Hamas. That is according to the IDF.
The US Supreme Court is set to hear arguments next month over whether Donald Trump should be allowed on the ballot in the state of Colorado. The outcome will have a major impact on the upcoming presidential election. Ira Spitzer has more.
The U.S.'s top court will take up the appeal from former President Donald Trump contesting the ruling removing him from Colorado's upcoming primary ballot over his role in the January 6, 2021 Capitol riot. Colorado's Supreme Court cited the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, barring those who have engaged in insurrection from holding office. The justices will hear oral arguments on February 8th, and the former president, who is currently the Republican frontrunner, has argued that the Colorado court doesn't have the jurisdiction to decide eligibility for the presidency. The Supreme Court ruling is expected to set a national precedent for whether other states can follow Colorado's lead.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks, looking today at fresh attempts by the United States this week to try and advance a diplomatic settlement to the crisis in the Middle East. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is spending a full week in the region. He'll visit Israel for the 5th time since the Hamas attacks of October the 7th, and is also travelling to Turkey, Greece, Jordan, Qatar, the UAE, Saudi Arabia and Egypt as well. Carla Ann Robbins, with America's Council on Foreign Relations, says the agenda has expanded following Israel's assassination last week of a senior Hamas official in Lebanon.
Well, U.S. officials have been saying that they didn't think that the Israelis would do a strike in Beirut if they thought this was going to spark a full-out war. But what has been a really horrifying war in Gaza and Israel could now be spinning out of control. When we first heard of Secretary of State Blinken's visit to the region, and this is going to be, as you said, his 5th to Israel and his 4th around the region since the war started, we really thought it was going to be primarily focused on urging the Israelis to reel back the war in Gaza. And now it seems to have a much wider agenda, trying to stop the conflict from spinning out of control.
That, of course, is precisely not where anyone wanted to find themselves at the beginning of this year, and it comes at a time when Iranian-backed Houthi rebels are making life very dangerous and tense in the Red Sea, targeting vessels and disrupting commercial tankers that they believe may have ties to Israel. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
The main headlines again. An investigation is ongoing into the cause of a blowout on an Alaska Airlines Boeing 737 MAX 9 flight. The Israeli Defense Force says it has dismantled Hamas's infrastructure in northern Gaza. And the US Supreme Court is set to hear arguments next month over whether Donald Trump should be allowed on the ballot in the state of Colorado. And that is the latest from.
The push to legalize marijuana is gaining momentum. These prescription doobies will do a whole lot more than just give patients a case of the munchies. Proponents are piping up to say that medical marijuana can help patients with some of the chronic illnesses that have been majorly killing their buzz. Unfortunately, 36 U.S. states are still not a kind bud of the legalization argument. But in states that do have the plan, the results have been, well, pretty far out, man. Patients nationwide are bluntly asking state legislatures to finally mellow out so that they and their doctors can work jointly to stop the suffering that's making a hash of their lives.
So it's clearly an issue that means a lot to these patients.
So states shouldn't toke their time with this policy. We'd be upset if patients had to wait a long time.
This is the Onion News Network.
You can stick it to the man and big tech. Join our FTL social mastodon at social.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
We're back. Yes, it is Free Talk Live, the Sunday night edition. The telephone number, if you'd like to join us, is 603-283-6160. I'm singing the last number. 603-283-6160.
But it's not an O, it's 0.
It is 0.
Don't
You're right.
hit O.
It is, yes. In the studio, it's myself, the captain.
Steve Classic.
And Nikki.
We just had a pretty interesting first hour.
Yeah.
Talking to Daniel Bonnier of Vermont.
Paulet.
Paulet, somewhere near Paulet.
West Paulet.
He owns 30 acres out there. He built a bit of a farm and a firearms
a golf range
training facility, if you will. He had a couple different firing ranges and would have different people come out. Anybody who wanted to train, could come up and have a safe place to do so, out of the way. 30 acres is a lot of land, right?
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So out of the way, right? It's safe, right? Nobody's gonna be hit by a stray thing coming out of his firing range, that kind of a thing.
It's not like downtown Bridgeport, Connecticut.
Yeah, he got all the permits and everything that he needed to get. He jumped through all the hoops, and yet the town is trying to railroad him. It's a pretty interesting case. You can just search Daniel Bonnier, Banyai. There's a bunch of news articles about him in a situation. There's also some YouTube videos of him fighting these people as well. So I want to thank him again for calling in and sharing his story. Before we go on, I need to tell you that Free Talk Live is brought to you by Dash Digital Cash. With fees of less than a penny per transaction, Dash is made for spending. Dash is one of the oldest cryptocurrencies and is widely available on exchanges, including the decentralized Maya protocol and in multi-crypto wallets. Thanks to the Dash DAO for sending us 32 Dash per month for this sponsorship. It's easy to get and easy to use Dash. You can learn more at dash.org. That's dash.org. All right. So, did you guys have any other thoughts on that?
Dash? It's great.
No, on Daniel.
I love Dash.
On Daniel's situation. Okay. All right. We'll move on.
Well, give out the give send. He had the give send go.
Yeah,
right?
Free Slate Ridge. Is that what it was?
I accidentally closed it. I'll find it again.
Just hit the Free Talk Live page.
We'll post it on our socials. And there's also a really great YouTube video that I'll be sure to.
It's givesendgo.com/stand W Slate Ridge. Stand with Slate Ridge. The W is short for
with.
Right,
yeah.
Givesendgo.com/stand W Slate Ridge. So there we go.
And there was a YouTube video that did a pretty nice summary. It's 30-minute long YouTube video that I can send to you, Captain, if you want to get that posted on our socials and whatnot.
We can do that. So we've done that. Let's go right away to, we have another caller. Unscreened caller, you're on Free Talk Live.
Hello.
Hello.
I just wanted to call in and say thank you for letting me listen.
Sure.
And that's supposed to be a radio joke because you can't stop me.
I was going to say, like, you're
Like,
welcome.
I'm like, yeah, I was like, you're welcome?
Yeah.
I'm Ron Burgundy.
Also, I wanted to apologize for not calling in as often as I should. Sarah from New Mexico seems to have put me to shame.
Oh,
and
well, she'll do
I'm
that.
going to do my best to remedy that.
What was your name again?
Inconvenient Tooth.
Inconvenient Keith?
Tooth.
I thought he said teeth.
Oh, tooth. Like singular. Like okay,
One
gotcha.
tooth?
All right. So
there's only one of me.
So what's on your mind tonight?
Oh, just those things mostly.
Yeah. Okay.
If you want me to throw something out there, I would urge the listeners to take your kids out of public school.
I love that. Yep, thank you. That's a great
That's
message.
a little nugget of wisdom.
Yeah.
Yeah. All the people who say things like, well, if your kid doesn't go to school, they won't be normal. That's the point.
Right.
Yeah,
But also, like, have you seen public school kids? Like, what? So, what is our definition of
Of
normal?
normal?
Because there's like litter boxes in classrooms right now. So,
We've reached idiocracy.
yeah.
Brought to you by Carl's Jr.
Yep. The children would be better off sitting around playing video games.
Yeah. They'd learn more than they would in public school. Absolutely.
Yeah. The thing about learning is that it doesn't require an institution.
Mm-hmm.
People have been learning like all of their lives.
Yeah. Well, and
Yeah,
that's
it's
the
a
thing,
weird
like
thing.
compulsory, institutionalized learning facilities are very much a new thing. And once you learn about the history of where these schools came from, like first it was the Catholic Church, right? And they were just trying to get people to obey God and obey the church. And then, it moved on to the state. And it's like, oh, well, if we make this compulsory and we force people to send their kids here, we will have obedient, citizens
Workers.
and they will obey the state and we will teach them the word of the state. It's very much about obedience and compliance, and it has nothing to do with education or learning.
John Taylor Gatto wrote some real good stuff tracing the history of modern public schooling to the old Prussian system during World War I. Where like what they were trying to develop was a way to get people to work in factories and get them trained up as quickly as possible with a minimal amount of time spent teaching them how to, pull the levers and, turn the wheels and that type of a thing. And so they found that this system of like chairs in a row and somebody up at front with a stick and, an authoritarian figure, right, going over the material was like the fastest way to train these factory employees. And so when they found out that worked and that people were just smart enough to pull the levers, but not smart enough to question why, then all of a sudden governments are like, hey, this is interesting.
We could use this.
We could do this to our citizenry and keep them just dumb enough to keep electing us.
Yeah.
But not smart enough to, rebel against their
Give them some
paradigm.
drinking fountains with fluoride in it.
Yeah, well, and that's why so many people, when you start saying things like this, like, we don't need schools, like, you can be educated outside of schools, and there are better, more efficient ways to do this that don't involve imprisoning children. People freak out, because this is one of my favorite topics, right? So I post a Facebook status like, public schools are prisons, and then people will comment on it, and they're like, they freak out. They're like, what do you mean? How are we going to educate the children? And I even had, I have one of my old teachers from middle school on Facebook, and she commented on that status about public school. I was quoting Peter Gray in his book, Free to Learn. And she goes, oh, does that make me a prison guard?
Oh, you're just poking the hornet's nest, aren't you?
And I didn't want to.
That's our Nikki.
I didn't really want to get into it, on Facebook comments, but I guess I'll get into it on the radio. And what I really wanted to say was, no, actually, you're far worse than a prison guard, because prisoners were, allegedly, they did something wrong. They were convicted of a crime. The only crime these children committed was that they are under the age of 18. So because of the compulsory schooling laws in the United States, they are forced to be here against their will. I mean, the levels of hopelessness and the rates of suicide are higher than they were in World War II or the Great Depression. I mean, and these are like, this is real stuff.
Yeah. If any of our listeners out there, are willing to do a real life comparison, go take a tour of your local prison.
Yeah.
And then go take a tour of your local high school.
If they let you into the high school to take a tour. They probably won't.
Well, I mean,
unless your child goes there.
There's ways you could do it in the.
What do you got to do? An audit of the school?
Season,
I don't know. If you could do that.
Look, my sister, my sister's moving here, and I just want to take a tour of the school so I can tell her about. There's ways.
There's
ways. You can say you're a taxpayer.
Same bricks on the wall, same flooring.
They use the same suppliers for school lunches as they do prison food.
Yep, it's not by accident.
Yeah. Like these are all government contracts, right? There's a whole lot of similarity between what schools do and what prisons do, because the thing about government is, as an institution, it only knows one thing, and that's force, that's coercion, right? So you're talking about, I'm trying to remember the truancy officers, right? Right? These are the guys that come around and make sure your kids are in school.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, you didn't say, how come? Oh, did you know that it's illegal for you not to send them to school and all this kind of thing? And it's up to the parents to fight back against this.
But is it really illegal to not send your kid to school?
Well, they have to be registered as, and you can even do unschooling. Like, you don't need to have like any sort of homeschooling curriculum, as long, and it depends state by state. As long as you fill out the state paperwork, they just need your kids to be on the record.
Right. You can't just not send your kids to school. That's illegal.
You have to opt out with the paperwork.
Well, they'll send people to kidnap your children.
Right, and possibly you as well.
Right.
Yeah, and possibly you as
well.
We
know they can do that.
Inconvenient Tooth, comments?
Yes. I would like to say further that I think a lot of people know exactly how bad the public school system is, and they just keep using it because it's a free babysitter. But I would say that it's going to be easier to just cut that now to get your kids out than it is to deal with the aftermath of indoctrinating them that way for that long. Get your kids out.
I couldn't agree more.
I agree as well. And I think most people are indoctrinated themselves, so they don't see anything wrong with the system. A lot of people don't think the way that we think, I suppose. Right. So they don't see anything wrong with public school. But I do think any freedom-minded person, any libertarian, anarchist-leaning person, probably most of the listeners of this show, if your kids are in public school, like, you might really want to think about it. But like, this isn't public school. This is a government indoctrination center.
It really is.
That's what it is.
Imagine if your children had to go to a place 5 days a week for 12 years where everything was branded Nike.
Yeah.
Right? I pledge allegiance to the swoosh of the United Shoes, or, whatever kind of thing. And, the bell goes off. Okay, Nike kids, it's time for you to go to your next Nike class, right?
Yep.
Are your kids going to be predisposed? Are your kids going to be brainwashed to believe that Nike is all powerful and all good and all things Nike and they couldn't possibly be bad? Of course
they're not going to want to wear Adidas.
The difference between the mafia and the government is that the mafia doesn't have a 12-year indoctrination program to put your kids through to make them believe that the mafia is doing good. But the state does. And that's why everybody thinks that the state is okay. That public education, government education, that is okay. Any other thoughts there, Tooth?
Nope, that's it. I'll let you guys get back to it.
Hey, thanks for the call, man. Call us again sometime. Don't let Sarah in New Mexico,
shame you too bad. Well, we haven't heard from her in a while.
It's been a while. Yeah.
I think she's still working on her pyramid scheme.
Oh, she might be really busy with that. Yeah.
Is that more of a triangle scheme at this point?
I think two-dimensional. Right? Yeah. I mean, it's not really a pyramid. It's more like a triangle. Like, you're at the top and all your friends are at the bottom. So it's a triangle.
Well, someone's at the top, but I don't think it's
right. It's probably the owner of the company, and you're kind of in the middle.
It's not Sarah or the girl you went to high school with. It's somebody else is at the top.
The CEO.
I'm just trying to think of other parallels to public school that I can draw. I mean, prison, yes. It's definitely
Well, it's monopolistic.
It's a brainwash camp.
And it definitely, I mean, it carries on from public school to then like the 40-hour work week, where kids that go to public school are a lot less likely to start their own business or be entrepreneurs than kids that were homeschooled.
Yes, kids, homeschooled kids also attend college earlier
Absolutely,
and more successfully.
Well, and that is a common misconception because that's the big thing, right? College, even though we all know that college doesn't guarantee you a job or a well-paying job.
Yep.
Guarantees you debt.
Guarantees you debt, absolutely, for sure. But a lot of parents are very concerned about their kids getting into a good college. That's a very big concern. My thoughts of that are irrelevant at this point. But homeschooled kids absolutely can qualify to go to college. There are homeschooled kids that have gotten into Harvard and other Ivy League colleges. There are ways, and they actually have special registration processes for homeschooled kids. And some colleges are actually seeking out homeschooled kids because they want that sort of diversity in their college. And a lot of kids that were homeschooled thrive in that college environment, and they are still able to get very good grades and
get out in 2 years.
enter the workforce. And a lot of the times, like you mentioned, they're going to college at 14, 16 years old. They're graduating early. It's almost like they're at more of an advantage. Yes. And the other common misconception is that a lot of people feel that they're too dumb to homeschool their kids or that they don't have the capabilities. And the beautiful thing about children they are so inquisitive. Children are natural learners. Yeah. So you can just let your kid be the guide of what they are learning. And I promise you, they will learn everything they need to on their own timeline.
Oh, and guess what? You're going to learn something on the way, too, if you're homeschooling.
Absolutely. Yeah, they will teach you so many things as well. I mean, it's a great thing. And unfortunately, I think a lot of the hurdles people face is that, the economy. Yeah. Right. So like a lot of household needs to be a 2-income household, especially if now you have dependents to feed and clothe and all of those things. So I understand that there are some very legitimate hurdles, but I also understand most people are living beyond their means. And I've seen people completely change their lives, downscale things, and live a more simple, wholesome life, so to speak, to be able to give their kids that opportunity to get them out of public schools and give them a real education.
And that's a real advantage, a real opportunity. Having one stay-at-home parent is a far greater advantage to any child than having 0 stay-at-home parents and sending them to daycare and sending them off to the government babysitter known as public schooling.
Yeah.
Do the research for yourself, but that evidence has been out there for some time. It's just commonly ignored because people don't want to put the effort in. People want to take the path of least resistance, and that is, the government says I should send my kids to public school. They don't want to put any effort into it. And really, you're right. You don't have to be a teacher. You just have to be an encourager. Yeah. You have to, when your child finds something that they're drawn to, that they're attracted to, a subject, anything, right? Encourage them to explore that subject.
Give them the resources. Yes. That's the biggest thing. It's not, you don't have to teach them. They will learn themselves, but give them the resources. Like if my kid was interested in architecture, well, let's bring them to an architect. I'm sure we can find somebody in the community. And a lot of people love children and love to just teach. Yep. And it's I'll teach you how to, you know what I mean? Just simple things like that. It doesn't have to be so serious or so stressful or so strict.
And there's algebra. Do you need algebra? No, I don't.
Also YouTube. This is the future. But you're the kids, and they're just sponges, and they can learn so quickly. So you put a kid in front of a computer, you don't even need to teach them how to use it. Maybe put parental blocks or something, but they'll figure it out themselves.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm a man of age. I'm over 50. I'm 51 now, and okay, I might be. I lean into tech pretty heavily and have most of my life, but there are people way younger than me that are far more technical than me at this point in space and time. However, even to this day, I myself and other people of my age have figured out how to learn stuff. For example, something goes wrong, and you're like, oh man, how do I fix this? You go to the YouTube,
right?
Yeah,
you
washing
hit the search
machine
engine.
not
YouTube
working.
University,
okay.
yeah.
I can't tell you how many times a week, a month, that people have been like, yeah, man, this thing happened, and then I went and I searcred online, and like, oh, there it was. There's like 5 videos on how to fix this thing, and bam, bam, bam. I went bought the part and I put it in, and now it's fixed.
Right.
And like, but that's how people of age learn. Imagine how fast children learn.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Like they're gonna pick that up, they're gonna absorb it like a sponge, they're gonna internalize it. Imagine like when I was growing up, you had to like look stuff up in the encyclopedia.
Yeah, you had to find a book or a person to talk to.
That it was a recent edition of the encyclopedia.
right.
If I had the world's knowledge at my fingertips on a magic rectangle in my pocket, oh my gosh, man. Like school is completely unnecessary. All of the things you need to learn, the basics of learning, right? Reading, writing, and arithmetic, right? The 3 R's as they call it, even though one of them's an A.
They can't spell it.
It takes a very small period of time to teach a human being how to read, how to write, and how to do math. It takes a very small period of time. The rest of the 12 years that the government is subjecting your children to is all brainwashing. It's all indoctrination.
It's wasted time. Is what it is. It's just, in kindergarten, we all line up and hold hand and then you have to waste time. This kid is being scolded because he can't sit still because you're forcing him to sit in a chair all day and he's 5. And there's a lot of time that's just spent filling time.
Well,
if you're just letting your kid learn on their own, they will learn these concepts in so much less time, and then they will get to be free to play the rest of the day like they're supposed to. They're kids.
And public schools teach to the median, right?
Yeah.
They don't teach to the highest aptitude or the lowest aptitude. They teach to the average of the class.
Yep.
Right? And this slows down the faster kids, and it also leaves behind the slower kids because it's too fast for them.
Yeah.
Right? There's so little specialization going on that they're trying to shove everybody into this homogeneous box with a time limit on it. Now, I don't know about you, but like when I started playing guitar, for example, I didn't sit around for like 50 minutes and, learn about the guitar and like pick up some tablature and try and figure out a song and then put it down and go do something else. No, I would spend hours.
Yeah.
Repetitive.
Whole days even, like on the weekends or whatever, right? Just going through, figuring out, this is how you play this, or this is the, the right notes to hit here, or, find, how to cover a song or get some tutelage somewhere from somebody else. But I did that all on my own, right? I didn't, there wasn't this 45-minute period with which I did this thing and a bell went off and I was like, okay, erase my mind, on to the next thing, right?
Yeah.
That's not how people learn. That is the antithesis of learning.
Right. Well, when a kid gets into something, they are into it.
Oh, yeah.
Like my kids, they were into Legos, and that's all they did was Legos or fishing or what, and they just glob onto that.
Right.
And that they just want to become an expert at that. So like now, if I want to learn about something, I'm kind of the same way.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, hey, you want to learn about guitar? You want to learn about
you're
whatever?
Interested in,
right. And you do as much research. You try to get as much information as possible.
Yeah. If you're not interested in something that you're learning,
it's
you're
work.
not gonna. Yeah, it's work.
Yeah.
You're not gonna remember it. You're not gonna retain it. But if you're a good student, you might get an A on the test because you memorized it. But the majority of what kids are learning in public school, they forget before summer vacation.
Oh yeah. 603-283-6160 is the number if you would like to call and talk about whatever's on your mind. You can comment on anything we've been talking about or change the subject. It's up to you. It's Free Talk Live. More coming up, including a number 2 story.
I've been told no in many different ways.
I give you an order and you're going to obey it.
George, you can go this way. You can't do that and you have to leave here.
You cannot bring Simon to the rally.
Walk with me.
Well, I'm comfortable here, actually. Whoa. Hey. Who do you think you are? Excuse me.
There is no video and audio allowed in this office.
No, I have work today.
You ain't going to make it.
Wait on the calendar. Now. Wait a minute. Whoa. Hey! Oh my God! Unbelievable! Why are you running from me? Because you're scared me. What am I being detained for?
You're being served.
What is this?
You're being served.
What is this?
Bureaucrats have a funny way of telling people no.
That's the sound of the men working on the chain.
Derek J's Victimless Crime Spree. Watch it for free and order the Director's Cut DVD at victimlesscrimespree.com.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Jagruti Dave. An investigation is ongoing into the cause of a blowout on an Alaska Airlines Boeing 737 MAX 9 flight from Portland, Oregon to Ontario, California. A panel of the plane broke open in the middle of the journey and its pilots scrambled to make an emergency landing. Investigators are searching around the Portland area for the door plug that blew off Friday's Alaska Airlines flight. US aviation officials have also ordered the grounding of around 171 Boeing 737 MAX 9s. Each plane will take around 4 to 8 hours to be assessed, and Alaska Airlines told customers to expect flight disruptions over the next week. None of the 171 passengers and 6 crew members were seriously hurt. A Boeing spokesperson said, "We agree with and fully support the FAA's decision to require immediate inspections of 737-9 airplanes with the same configuration as the affected airplane." The Israeli Defense Force says it has dismantled Hamas's infrastructure in northern Gaza. That's as the death toll from the Israel-Hamas war continues to rise, with Gaza officials blaming an Israeli airstrike for the deaths of 2 Palestinian journalists, and as Israeli officials say a police officer was killed in violence in the occupied West Bank. Trent Murray has more from Tel Aviv.
The IDF is saying it's continuing to push southward as part of its military operations. We've seen more airstrikes overnight around Khan Yunis and Rafah, as well as artillery fire, and it comes as the IDF spokesperson announced here overnight that they have now, in his words, completely dismantled Hamas's military framework within the northern part of the Gaza Strip, and that they are now winding back combat operations there. They say as part of those operations, they have now killed 8,000 militants from Hamas. That is according to the IDF.
The US Supreme Court is set to hear arguments next month over whether Donald Trump should be allowed on the ballot in the state of Colorado. The outcome will have a major impact on the upcoming presidential election. Ira Spitzer has more.
The U.S.'s top court will take up the appeal from former President Donald Trump contesting the ruling removing him from Colorado's upcoming primary ballot over his role in the January 6, 2021 Capitol riot. Colorado's Supreme Court cited the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, barring those who have engaged in insurrection from holding office. The justices will hear oral arguments on February 8th, and the former president, who is currently the Republican frontrunner, has argued that the Colorado court doesn't have the jurisdiction to decide eligibility for the presidency. The Supreme Court ruling is expected to set a national precedent for whether other states can follow Colorado's lead.
Don't miss a moment of Free Talk Live. Get our archives daily via our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com.
If only there was some sort of, I don't know, slogan-y type catchphrase that we could invent to let people know when we are indeed back.
Like a piece of music or something?
If only there was some, like a catchphrase, if you will. You know, something like 3 letters or shorter. You know, less than 4 letters anyway, to let them know.
We could say, and we're back every time we come back on.
That wouldn't work.
That's a good idea.
That's too simple.
Sounds like a bit much. Yeah, we'll consider it. It is Free Talk Live. The telephone number 603-283-6160. That's right.
That number again is
603-283-6160.
Oh, the number is
Why does he sing the last number? I don't know.
For pizzazz, a little razzle-dazzle.
He's like a crazy person. In the studio tonight, it's me, Brother Captain.
Brother Steve Classic.
And Sister Nikki.
Let's go to the phones right away. We have Ricky from the Commonwealth calling. Ricky, you're on Free Talk Live.
Thank you there, Brother Captain. Brother Steve. Sister Nikki, good evening.
Good evening.
Yo.
Well, you know what's funny? I heard you talking about the public school system. Now, Sister Nikki will remember me talking in the past when she used to do Wednesdays with Miss Bonnie. And, I'm sitting here with my battle flag. It made me think of this. The Civil War, the way they approached it. You see, it's very interesting. Now, here's my theory of why you have this sudden upsurge of chronic depression and suicides amongst these young people. See, when I was a young person, I took the opportunity to speak to older people. Now, there was a woman lived right next to me in the half a double I grew up in, and she told me what it was like here in Pennsylvania when it came to the Civil War. And she was 86, and she died in like 1985. Now, the fact of the matter is, so I knew this as a young person when I'm in kindergarten. And the reality is it checked out because I was a bookworm. Now, here's the problem. You see, when I was in kindergarten, I was already at a level where I completed the second grade. Mm-hmm. And by the time I was in the sixth grade, I was at a high school level. And by the time I was at high school, I was at a college level. And I could see where these young kids are getting this way because imagine this. Now, I could have been one of these kids. So by the time we got to the Civil War, which in my case was early on, they had an interesting approach. I really didn't talk much about it. Maybe I had a lie or two for a spin, and then we just move on. The word Confederacy was never mentioned. Now, my neighbor confirmed how it was. They were split here, and no doubt, in 1864, November to be exact, we almost joined the Confederacy. And I can see how these young kids, these people are supposed to be mentors, they're teachers. But here they're lying to them. Mm-hmm. So they're getting depressed and even worse, self-destructive. That's my theory.
Well, and you got to remember,
I could have
too,
been one of these children.
Yeah, you got to remember, too, the victors of wars write the history books, right? And
yes.
so then if the institutions of those war victors then use that as brainwashing material, why they can literally change everybody's thoughts on history.
Right. It's amazing you say that because, see, this is where you have this major thing. Now, and I spoke recently about Nikki Haley, and that was a setup question. The question was, what started the Civil War? Well, it's that question she answered correctly. Now, the second question was, what was it about? Now, she did not speak much about it. And I could see why, because it's a setup and she knew it. Now, they're still trying to pump that. And the reality is, how about this, the worst part? It was over the land. That's why 400,000 Confederate and 200,000 Union died. Lincoln said he would kill everyone on both sides for the Union. He sure as hell wasn't doing it on slavery. That wasn't even a thought until 1863. Mm-hmm. Lincoln was a white supremacist, tyrannical son of a bitch. He didn't care.
And that it just sounds nice, right? Like, oh, it was for slavery, and it's a way. Slaves. It's a way to kind of
people for that.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, people, use your common sense.
But it was a way to
other people.
The Confederacy. It was a way to make the Confederacy seem like the bad guys, the slave owners, the plantation owners, and it was a way to make the Union look good. You know what I mean?
The North had twice as many slaves. That's why their military was so powerful, because they were all in the military. Yeah. The rest of them down in the South, they were down the plantations to the end of the war, and they were still down there. When the Union came down and said, get the hell out, and then they got screwed over ultimately again.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely. There's a lot of lies that are taught in public schools. And I want to touch upon, again, how you were speaking to communicating with older folks in a community. And I think that is so valuable to have interactions with grandparents, but also other older folks in the community, because they do hold a lot of wisdom, and they hold, a lot of information about the old ways, and especially in the age that we're in right now where things are changing so rapidly, there's so much wisdom that's being lost. And I feel like the government, through these schools, it's not by accident that the family unit is being torn apart and separated. Mm. And a lot of kids kind of think nowadays, like, old people are stupid, they're crazy, like they don't know what they're talking about, and really like older people in a community, like that's where the wisdom is, like that's who should be teaching the children. But instead you have some 25-year-old teacher who's like, you know what I mean? And I don't,
what experience do they have, right?
Well, exactly. So like if you're going to have a teacher, shouldn't it be an older person with much more life experience?
Well, and you want to look at too, before the Prussian style system was implemented, most of the schoolhouses that existed did what they call teaching down. Yeah. Right. So, there wasn't this, if you're in this grade, you're over here and you're separate from all the other kids, except maybe during recess.
No, there was a lot of age mixing.
Right?
Yeah.
There was a whole bunch of age mixing. And in fact, the teachers would rely on the older students who had already learned a whole bunch of stuff to help them teach down, right, to the younger kids. Now, what does that do for the older kids? Well, it reinforces everything they've already learned, but it also teaches them a much more valuable skill, which is how to teach.
Right.
Yeah, well, and a responsibility of mentoring a younger person. There's a school in Massachusetts called the Sudbury Valley School. It's in Sudbury, Massachusetts, and they use an unschooling model. So there's a lot of age mixing going on, and the kids are allowed to like choose their path in learning, and they have a lot of freedom. And they'll notice that in this particular school and in a lot of other settings like this, the kids, like the older kids, will find a child that's a few years younger than them, and they will mentor them.
Yeah.
And they will become very protective of the child, and they will kind of become like a mentor. And it teaches kids there's a lot less bullying in these situations because you're less likely to bully someone that's younger than you than a peer that's your same age. Right. It teaches them how to have responsibility to care for somebody that's younger, the skills of teaching and passing along that knowledge. I mean, there's so many really beneficial things that come from age mixing that just doesn't happen in public school because you're with all 9-year-olds and you have to teach the state curriculum, and the teachers don't even have freedom to teach the kids what they want to teach or the subjects because it's all about the state mandatory testing and making sure the kids can score high enough on those mandatory testing.
And
so you get a raise.
Well,
exactly, so they get a raise.
You get more money.
There's a stigma associated too with this sort of like the age in betweeners, right? So if you're like just on the cusp of the school year with your birthday or whatever, you might be a grade behind because your birthday hasn't happened, even though all of your peers are in a grade ahead of you. And then
it's just this arbitrary date that they just chose.
Right.
Yeah.
And then if you don't graduate, quote unquote, to the next grade with, your chosen set of their chosen set of your peers, right, then you're made to feel like a failure because you didn't keep up with the rest of the 9-year-olds or whatever it is, right? And that's the antithesis of learning. That's punishing somebody for something that is out of their control.
It's age discrimination.
It totally is.
Yeah. Ricky?
Well, it's funny. I've said many, many times, all the state is a strong arm extension of the federal government. The federal government like to hide, and the state like to hide in different ways. And it reminds me of your earlier caller, the first caller. He shouldn't be surprised because that's exactly what's going on. The state's doing the dirty work. The federal government, the good guys in this, you see. We're not at fault here. It's not us, of course. It's the state, and it's all confusing. There's nothing confusing about it.
Well, if the state picks up all the work, I'm sure the federal government can just write him a check, and that's probably what the state wants.
No doubt. You said it. I didn't, Brother Steve.
Well, I don't know if that's true. That's just an educated guess.
Yeah. Hey, Ricky, thank you for the call, man. We appreciate you. 603-283-6160. I want to circle back to, the number one story before we get to the number two story. Steve reminded me that we really hadn't talked about it very much, but
we interrupted the program.
We did. It was important.
It was great.
And it was a great first hour.
Yeah. It was really good.
America, that's the United States, has borrowed $1 trillion since the start of football season, since September, let's just say.
How many zeros are in a trillion?
I honestly...
A lot.
7?
Uh-oh.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
Uh-oh.
Oh, must be the storm?
Yeah, lights have been flickering. Ugh.
We may still be live.
We are.
We may still be live.
We might still be live because I'm seeing the
compressor
working over there.
I can't hear in my headphones, so.
Yeah.
All right, so if
Something
you're
is
listening, if you're still hearing our voices,
going
we're
on.
getting flickering lights up here with
We're
some
waiting.
Is this what they were talking about with the
Funky
snow in
electricity?
New England?
Yeah.
They tried to warn
Winter
all the
storm.
Floridians tried to warn us about this, but we didn't listen.
Or maybe we just lost our headphone feed. I don't know.
No.
I mean, that's kind of what I was hoping.
All right, so the captain has to take over the starship here. Okay. So
Anyways, how many zeros is it in a trillion?
I don't know.
My guess was 7 because there's 6 in a million.
But then you get to a billion, then
So
1,000
9?
billion? I don't know. But I did the math. If you divide a trillion by the football season, which is roughly 4 months, it's $250 billion a month. And it was like, I don't know, then divide that by 30 days. It's, I don't know, 5 or 6 billion a day.
That's crazy.
In borrowing. So who is it the Federal Reserve that's like...
I also don't really love the word borrowing in this case. You know what I mean? Because where they're borrowing it from the Federal Reserve, so essentially they're just printing more money. Like they're not actually borrowing it. They're just destroying the economy worse than it already was.
Well, they're loaning it into existence. That's how money is made. It's loaned. So
that's how fiat currency is made.
So it's loaned to the federal government, $1 trillion, and then magically more money has to come back to the bank. $1.5 trillion has to come back, or whatever, $1 trillion and $1 billion. Interest payment of $1 billion. So,
and considering we're how many $1 trillion in debt?
I think it was 34.
About 35?
34. We just passed the 34 trillion.
So I don't know if it's going to come back.
At that pace, I think by next year at this time we'll be at 40 trillion, roughly.
Yeah.
And like where is the is it 50 trillion? 100 trillion? What's after a trillion? A quadrillion? Can we be 34?
A gazillion?
A gazillion? We're $1 gazillion in debt.
And that's the thing. It's like, when are people going to finally admit that the system has failed? Is it when we're $1 gazillion? These are made up numbers because at one point in time they were unfathomable.
Right, even $1 trillion.
And now
it was like $1 trillion. Like, wow, that's a lot of money. And now it's like 34 trillion, no big deal.
Maybe the U.S. could take a page out of Venezuela's book, and they just kept taking the currency back and then like changing it, like, oh, this is the new currency, and they would just like take away, like slash off a bunch of zeros.
Right.
Yeah, and they're like, oh, this is the new. I forget what their currency was called, but this is the new. Whatever.
Peso or whatever.
Yeah, this is the new one, and they would just slash off like 4 zeros from it. They'd make everybody, bring their money back to the bank, and then reinstitute the new money that was...
Well, that's always the fear, is like they're going to do it on a long weekend, like a Thanksgiving weekend, where you can't get your money Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Monday, banks are closed. We're going to revalue the currency. And that's why people are like, well, store cash. Like, well, what good is cash going to do? You've got to store value. And the thing is, like, what I'm doing with extra money, besides buying lumber, is buying durable goods that will last a long time. Buying good quality
because
boots.
That's worth more.
Yeah. If you have that, if you buy it with today's dollars, it will hold its value, I think, longer as inflation goes up.
And I think that is good advice, because especially where we have all of these goods, I mean, food is becoming more and more expensive. Ammunition is becoming everything is becoming more and more and more expensive, to the point where it's going to be unattainable. And we've seen this happen in other countries where the economy really tanks, and then a loaf of bread is like $50 and people can't even afford to eat. They're literally starving in the streets.
Right.
And I mean, I hate to be all doom and gloom, but it does seem like this is kind of the direction that the United States is going in.
It's the McDonald's. What was it? The McDonald's Big Mac. The cost of the Big Mac basically tells you where the economy is going.
Yeah.
Because
right now it's like what, like $20.
We talked about this, like how much is a Happy Meal or whatever. It's like $8 or $10 a Big Mac value meal. I don't know, $18. Crazy.
Yeah.
Absolutely insane. So I just saw. Someone posted something, like we were talking about, you saw something on Facebook, but someone posted that they just spent $42 for 2 hamburgers and fries at Five Guys.
At Five Guys.
Right. So you think, all right, you're going to go out for
$42. That's still like expensive. That's like a restaurant, like a sit-down restaurant meal.
Yeah, not
in
anymore.
Five Guys, I mean, it's it's a step above McDonald's, right? But it's still, I mean, that's still fast food. It should still be fast food prices.
Yeah. But, if you think about, going to the grocery store, like I got to spend $40. If you took that same $40 and said, I'm going to make hamburgers, you could probably, I don't know, at the grocery store, you could probably make 8 burgers or 10 burgers instead of buying 2. So you're basically paying for someone to wash your dishes. And at a fast food joint, there are no dishes. So what are you paying for? The convenience of someone cooking a subpar quality burger?
I mean, that's typically how it always is, though. I mean, and that's why...
I think, Captain, we might be back.
Hopefully.
We're not back. And we're back.
And we're not back.
We're not back.
But, I mean, and that's typically just how restaurant and eating always is.
Someone's cooking your food. Someone's washing your dishes.
And that's kind of why, typically I don't even like to eat out because I always feel like I could make it better for cheaper at home.
And if you make it at home, you're not paying tax on your meal.
Yeah.
Which in New Hampshire is 8.5%.
That's crazy.
That's the tax.
Well, they got to tax us somewhere, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you want to go
or
out
they
to
could
eat?
just not.
I know in Connecticut, the restaurant tax is 1% higher than the sales tax because Connecticut has a sales tax. New Hampshire doesn't.
Yeah.
But still, you're paying 8.5% over what your meal is. So
yeah.
Get
and
your
that
food at the
also
grocery
is
store.
like that's something that people actually don't really consider most of the time when they're calculating those costs.
Right.
People rarely think about the tax because it is rolled into the total. I remember when I was in California, because at this point I was so used to living in New Hampshire with no sales tax.
Right.
And even so I was in LA County and I forget what the sales tax was, but I think it was like 9% or something like astronomical.
Well, it's a state tax and a county tax.
Yes.
Right? Like I think New York is the same way.
So the county tax in LA County it's basically I was buying something that was $20 and I knew it was $20. I looked at the price. So I went to scan it. That was the only thing I was buying. And then she charged me for like $23, $24, $26, something like that. And I was like, I don't really care about like the few bucks, but I just want to let you know, like, that's what it was priced at. I'm being overcharged. Like, it just wasn't.
Right.
I'm like, I'm not really going to fight you about it, but just to let you know, I was just mentioning it to the cashier.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, oh, that's a tax. And I'm like, yeah, but you didn't hear me. Like, it was like $3 on $20. And she's like, yeah, that's just the tax.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe it. And then I went and did the math. I was like, oh, yikes. Yeah, it was almost like 10%.
Wow.
For the tax. I think they had the highest tax in the country. But even so, and it's like all of those people that live there, I mean, millions of people live in LA County.
Every day they're
and I'm sure all those people, I mean, that's a very rich area to live, so I'm sure they're spending a ton of money, and they're just paying all of these taxes without even thinking about it. It just gets rolled into the total.
Right.
And they don't even think about it.
Well, I bought some stuff in Connecticut, and I'm dealing with a vendor there, and I wasn't dealing with my regular salesman. So the kid said, well, it came up to like $200, and he says it's $212. I said, well, I'm shipping this stuff to New Hampshire. There's no sales tax. He goes, well, you have to pay the sales tax.
Not if you're shipping it to New Hampshire, technically. I mean, you don't on Amazon,
right? Well, this was in Connecticut. So anyway,
yeah,
it was through a vendor, but not through Amazon.